Hello and welcome to Endurance Minded. It's the podcast that aims to redefine what it means to reach our full potential by exploring how movement and mindset impacts our lives and how we can all work to show up as the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Taylor Thomas, founder at TEC, and before we get started, I've got an all call. If you're a coach or an entrepreneur in the health and fitness industry who's trying to grow your business without burning out, I want to personally invite you to apply for the Growth Circle. The Growth Circle is our business accelerator program at TEC, and it's designed specifically to serve providers like you in the health and fitness industry. People who are incredible at what they do, but they need a proven framework and real support to actually scale. Let's be real, running a coaching business can feel like a grind. You're juggling programming and client communication, marketing, admin work, and somehow you're still trying to grow your business. That's where the Growth Circle comes in. Inside the program, we help you nail down your ideal client and get really clear on what your offer is. We help you build a consistent lead gen process so you're not wondering where your next client comes from. We help you improve your sales skills without feeling salesy. And most importantly, create systems and support so that you're not doing it alone. You'll be a part of a driven community of other business owners in this space who get it. We host regular group calls, team intensives, mastermind sessions to make sure you're never stuck trying to figure it out in a silo. So if you're tired of winging it, if you're tired of trying to do it all by yourself, to recreate the wheel, figure out what levers to pull, what's broken and what's not, if you're ready to turn your passion into a business that actually works for you, I want to invite you to apply. You can find the link to the Growth Circle in our show notes. And I want you to really think about what's best for you and your business. I want you to think about how your business can really make an impact on the industry and how it can give you the life that you're excited about and make the money that you deserve, working with the clients that you love, spending time investing in the things that you care about and you're passionate about. So if this is a problem you're committed to solving and you want to take your business to the next level, again, click the link in the show notes. I can't wait to hear from you. Hello and welcome back. There is so much talk around discipline, around motivation. I've certainly talked about it at length on this podcast, and we hear discipline juxtaposed against motivation to say that, or to offer up that motivation is fleeting, discipline is what moves us forward, that the discipline is the primary driver. And that's important. And I think it's true, right? Motivation is an emotion and it is fleeting like all other emotions. It comes and goes. Discipline is important. And it's something to be built. It's a muscle to be worked. It is a primary driver, I think, in those of us that are hungry for more and hungry for growth. But I don't think that discipline is actually the full and complete story. Most people, most of you listening, you don't have a discipline problem. You don't have a problem being disciplined. You don't have a problem moving the needle. Our audience is one of high performers, of growth-oriented and minded individuals. And I would argue that discipline is actually not the issue. I don't think that most people that I know and that I have the opportunity to work with and interact with in our incredible community have a discipline issue. But I do think that it begs the question, then what stops us? What keeps us from our goals? The days that we're quote unquote off, the weeks that we're off, the months that we fall, out of our routines, out of our rhythms, we fall off of our goals, we fall short of the things that we said that we would accomplish. What is it then that keeps us from knocking it out of the park every single day, all the time? And we know that no one is perfect. And so there has to be another aspect to the equation. There has to be another piece of the puzzle, because if it were just up to discipline, then every day would be perfect. We would say, I'm a disciplined individual. I don't need motivation to keep going. I'm going to continue to push forward in spite of how I feel, my lack of motivation, the ebbs and flows, the inevitable peaks and valleys and things that I'm navigating. But discipline's going to allow me to move forward, and I'm going to nail it. I'm going to be 100%. Well, that's not the case. Right? Even the most disciplined individuals, the most motivated, the most goal-oriented, the most clear on their objectives, they have off days, off weeks. They miss workouts. They fail at work. They fail in their relationships. They fail in communication. They fail in self-leadership and leadership of others. And so there has to be another piece of the puzzle. And what I'm going to posit is that the other piece of the puzzle is our defaults. So what we're going to talk about today is that the other side of discipline, the thing that actually is keeping us from our goals, is our default mechanisms. It's when we're rested, when we're motivated, when we're clear, we're all elite, right? We all have great success. It's when things get chaotic. It's when things don't go as planned. It's when we aren't able to execute in alignment with our expectations. It's when someone on the other side of the conversation doesn't show up in a way that we thought that they would. It's when our expectations of ourselves are disruptive, and that's when our standards drop. And specifically, they tend to drop to whatever is easiest. And so what we're going to talk about today is, what are those defaults? And how do we work the muscle of strengthening our defaults so that our baseline is actually increased? So that when discipline fails us, and it will, because again, no one is perfect, then we are going to fall to a default that is still in alignment with how we've defined success and the highest and best version of ourselves and what success actually looks and feels like. Because I think that, boiled down, we don't rise to our goals, but what we can do, and often happens, is that we fall to whatever our defaults are. And let's start by just diving a little bit deeper into reframing discipline, specifically why discipline might actually be overrated as the thing that gets so much attention. I think that we can all potentially reframe our beliefs that we tend to hold very tightly about discipline, because that's also, I'll be the first to admit that is a extremely sexy thing to identify with as an individual, is someone who is extremely disciplined, right? That gets a lot of hype. People look up to people that are disciplined. We say, oh, I could never do that. I wish I were more disciplined. So if you were one of those people, it feels really good to be disciplined. But what is missing? And again, this is where defaults come in. And, I think if we think critically about it, we allow ourselves to admit that discipline isn't the complete and total package. It's not the full story. It's not the total narrative. We know that discipline works in short bursts, but ultimately over long timelines, it does let us down. We have dips, we have ebbs in how discipline allows us to show up. When life gets complex, we have business stress, we have family stress, we have fatigue, we have travel, we have injury, we have any of the things that life throws at us. Discipline starts to get a bit more nuanced, right? It can carry us for a while through those things. It can carry us through the disruption. It can carry us through the rough patches. But if that continues to happen, when does discipline falter? So again, it tends to work in shorter bursts, but over long periods of time, if we expand the time horizon, discipline does eventually falter. And even elite performers break when they rely solely on willpower alone. And I think that discipline is what we use when things are going really well. But the defaults that I'm referring to, and I'll unpack that a bit more in a second, the defaults are what decide who you are when they're not. Right? So discipline is what you use when things are going well, and the defaults are what decide who you are and how you show up when things are not going so well. And, there's so many versions of this. We talk a lot about the intersection of high performance in lots of capacities or lots of areas of life. We talk about athleticism, business, entrepreneurship, leadership, family, and this looks like if you're an entrepreneur, a high performer in the career space, or in your career, and it's when revenue dips, right? You had a bad quarter, you had a bad year, you lost a big contract, a customer leaves. What do you do? Right? Do you double down? Do you continue to market? Do you continue to focus on client acquisition? Do you continue to pour into your team, or do you retreat? Right. So again, this is that default that I'm talking about. Discipline in that situation only carries us so far. The default actually is what dictates our response. You can also think about in the athletic space, when training gets hard, when we feel fatigued, we maybe get injured, things aren't going as planned. What happens? Well, do we adapt or do we skip? Are we okay with backing off on our training approach? Are we okay with adjusting the training plan, taking easy days, even though they might not feel like exactly what we want to be doing? Or do we skip it altogether because we feel like it's not the highest and best use of our time, or maybe it's not worthwhile? Again, that's that default. Right? What is the default? Do I skip or do I adapt? So I just want you to see that these defaults show up in lots of different areas. And again, discipline can only really be part of that equation before it ultimately will fall away and we find ourselves in alignment with those defaults. So let's talk about what defaults are. Right? I want to define it clearly for you before we move forward so that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Defaults are automatic behaviors that you fall back on when you stop thinking. I'm going to say that again because I think this is really important. There's a few critical pieces I want to break apart here. But when I talk about defaults, the definition that I am using is that defaults are automatic behaviors that you fall back on when you start thinking. And the thinking part is important because that's where the two roads diverge when it comes to discipline and defaults. When we're thinking, when we're engaged, when things are going well, when we have the ability, the time and space and energy for critical thought, we can direct our energy in the direction of discipline. We can make a disciplined decision. We can align with a disciplined behavior. But when things are going to hell, when that primal brain switches on, we get into fight or flight or freeze, when that parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, then what happens? When we stop thinking and we come back to our lizard brain because we're trying to just survive, then what happens? And that's our defaults. That's when it kicks in, and that's when discipline is a little less clear. And again, I think it can let us down when we fully rely on it. So let's talk about some examples across multiple domains. Again, I want you to see these intersections that are showing up in really all areas of your life. With our health, is our default to, again, skip a workout or shorten the workout. I'm not feeling well. My body's not responding. I'm sore. I feel tired. Maybe I'm feeling like I might be a little bit injured. Something doesn't feel quite right. I'm going to listen to my body. What do? Do I skip or do I shorten? Now, I want to say there's certainly times when skipping is appropriate. But the point is what is our default? Is our default that we pick the absolute easiest way out? Or do we look for opportunities to adapt? When also in health, let's think about nutrition. Do we order food or do we eat what's prepped? Right, do we take the easy route and we Uber Eats and get the simple, easy, quick fix dopamine hit delivered to our door? Or do we lean into what's available? Even if it's not ideal, even if it's not what we're craving, right? Again, discipline can only take us so far. When we're super stressed, how many of us have been there? I know it's happened to all of us. It certainly happened to me. had a tough day, super stressed. You just want an easy win. You want something that feels good. You got food in the refrigerator. You had a meal planned, but instead, what do? You pick the easy win, right? You pick the thing that you know is not in alignment with your goals. And again, I'm not here to be dogmatic about nutrition specifically. I think it's all about balance and all about enjoying all of the full spectrum of food. But again, point being, what's your default? Let's look at business. Do we, is our default that we avoid hard conversations, or do we address them early and often? Do we show up as leaders? Do we call people into their full potential? Same thing in our work. Is our default that we are reactive, or are we proactive in our priorities? Right? When things start to get really stressful, do we continue to let the fires come at us, or do we take a beat? Do we focus on proactively prioritizing what needs our attention so that we can continue to show up? With leadership, what's our default? Do we shut down, or do we communicate clearly under stress? This is a big one. Communication tends to be from what I've seen, this could be communication with ourselves as well as communication with others. Communication tends to be one of the first things that falter, and I think one of the places it shows up most meaningfully when it comes to where discipline takes a back seat. It can only be so disciplined, and discipline tends to under-deliver when it comes to nuanced and dynamic communication. So do we shut down when we're stressed? I don't want to talk about it. I can't deal with this. Or do we communicate clearly under stress? Do we communicate with ourselves clearly? Our values, our goals, who we said we were going to become, the promises we made to ourselves. So I think it's less about perfect days. It's more about building resilient defaults. How do we actually package these things so that when we fall back on them, they're actually things that we're proud of? So with that in mind, let's talk about what bad defaults can be. Specifically, I think there's a cost here. By not recognizing that discipline isn't the entire answer, it's not the complete story, we also are held victim to and held captive by wherever our defaults are at. So if they are not good, if they're not in alignment with our values, our goals, who we want to become, then there's a real cost here. So this might make people uncomfortable, but I'm going to lean in here. And because I know that the bad defaults, and I've seen it show up for myself as well as others as I've thought more critically about this. Bad defaults compound very quietly over time. You might not recognize it at first, right? The one shitty communication, the one stressful day, stressful week, the tough month. But what happens when that continues to happen? What does that look like when it compounds and you let it happen again? And you let it happen again and again? Discipline slips and you fall to that bad default, right? We don't rise to our goals. We fall to our defaults. And what does that look like? I want you to really put yourself there. What I think it looks like is, one, it creates inconsistency. And inconsistency at its core kills trust. It kills trust both internally and externally. It kills trust with ourselves. We continue to do that. We continue to fall to those bad defaults. What happens? We start to not be able to trust ourselves. The internal narrative and dialogue changes. Maybe I'm not a good communicator. Maybe I can't trust myself. Maybe my expectations are unrealistic. Maybe I'm not smart enough to accomplish this. Maybe my goals are unrealistic, right? It can start to snowball, and it will happen. And then externally as well, as those bad defaults ultimately lead to some sort of action as a result of those bad defaults, well, then there's an external representation of that. What does that look like? Well, people see how we operate under stress. People see that maybe we're inconsistent in how we show up, depending on the day, depending on the external stressor, right? We're on a high horse one day, we're in the gutter the next day, right? People start to pull back, they retreat, they can't trust how we show up because they're not sure who we're going to be and if we're going to be in alignment with those defaults. And then ultimately, I think it bottoms out with an identity conflict or an identity crisis. And it's that narrative of, I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. And I think we've all been there. And if you haven't, or you don't think that you have, I want you to think really hard, because I think this is kind of part of the human condition, is that we have this dialogue internally that says, I know what I should be doing. I know that I should just eat the food in my refrigerator. I know that I should have just gone for a walk instead of sit on the couch, even though the workout was planned, looked like X, Y, and Z. I know that I should have communicated clearly or taken a beat and not been so reactive in that stressful environment. I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. So what does that mean about me? Right? Does that mean I'm not capable? Am I lazy? Again, it starts to erode trust internally, and ultimately this changes our perspective of ourselves and our identity. And the gap between who you are and who you say you want to be, usually just your defaults playing out over time. So that gap widens. I say I'm going to be this person. I'm disciplined. I'm clear on my goals. I'm driven. I'm a high performer. I've shown up before. I've done this well. I can do this. This is the person I want to be. But it starts to drift, right? Again, slowly over time, as discipline lets us down little by little by little. And then this gap starts to be created. And again, that gap between who we are and who we say we want to be is usually just those defaults that play out over long periods of time. So, how do we build better defaults? I hope at this point you can see and you can hear how this has shown up in your own life. Those times when you knew what to do, but you just didn't do it. You're disciplined usually, but it slipped in this instance, right? And then it slipped in the next instance. And again, it starts to compound. Again, it's like water on a rock. Slowly, it starts to erode. It changes our perception of ourselves. It changes others' perceptions of us. So how do we build better defaults? I'm going to make this very clear for you. I'm going to break it down in steps, because I want you to see that this is actually not a heavy lift. And it's something you can work on in real time, but it does take a little bit of effort. So bear with me. I'm going to break this down. Step one, I want you to identify what I call your failure moments. This is very simply, when do you typically fall off? When do you typically make some decision that is out of alignment with a couple things? What you said you were going to do, what you know is best for you, or what you committed to that now seems unapproachable or too far away. So identify them. I want you to write them down, right? When are your failure moments? These times that you typically fall off. Here's some examples. Busy weeks. Things got crazy. Work went sideways, family, kids. I get busy. I'm less likely. Discipline starts to slip. I think this is probably the most common one, right? Now, there's some people that thrive in this. I'm going to give you a few more examples. Travel. If you're someone that travels for work, travels for leisure, if travel is disruptive, whatever that looks like, that's another example. Emotional stress. Right? So I can deal with work stress, but as emotional stress creeps in, is that something where you have the failure moment? That starts to feel like too much. Low energy days. Days when you don't feel like you just have the energy. Maybe you had a shitty night of sleep. Maybe stress has been mounting. Maybe you pushed your body, whatever. You don't have any energy. So I want you to identify when are those moments? What are the things that have to happen? What's the ecosystem? What's the environment? What are the inputs that create those situations, those instances when you typically fall off? Okay. Now, step two. This is going to be counterintuitive, but bear with me. I want you to lower the floor. What do I mean by that? So the question that we need to be asking is not, how do I stay perfect? The question that we need to be asking is, what's the minimum that I still do no matter what? Because here's the thing. It's the big swings that actually create more friction, more disruption than if we just defined what's the minimum I do no matter what. Because when we have the perfect day, but then we fall off for a couple of days, and then the only way we feel like we can be successful is to get back to the perfect day, but then that takes several days, right? You see, there starts to be these big gaps between the days that are actually solid because we've used perfection, specifically through the lens of discipline, as a benchmark. What I'm going to offer up is the second step. Again, what we're working on here is how to build better defaults. The second step of that is you're not going to ask yourself, how do I stay perfect? What you are going to ask yourself is, what's the minimum that I still do no matter what? I'm going to give you some examples. All right. I'm going to do a 10-minute workout instead of a 1-hour workout. I'm going to do some push-ups. I'm going to do some air squats. I'm going to go for a walk. Whatever that is, define your minimum. What is the minimum I still do no matter what? Another example in the business realm, I'm gonna do one meaningful action specific to my business per day. I'm gonna make a piece of content. I'm gonna have a meaningful conversation. I'm gonna connect with someone on my team. I'm gonna define what that is. But what you do, no matter what, even if it's going to hell and you feel like it's burning down and you're in hyper stress mode, what's the one meaningful action in your business you can take each day? Another example, what's one honest conversation you can have instead of avoiding? Instead of avoidance, what's one honest conversation you can have? So again, all I want you to do is I want you to define what's the minimum that you still do no matter what in the key areas of your life. Again, perfection is not the goal. Step number 3, I want you to pre-decide your response. So once you define step number 2, I want you to predefine your response. So what you're not going to do is you're not going to decide in the moment how you're going to react. Because again, that's going to bring us back. That's when discipline falls away. That's going to bring us back to those bad defaults. So we're not going to decide in the moment. We're going to decide in advance. So let's use the examples I just gave you. If I don't feel like training, I still do 10 minutes. Right? That's the decision. If I feel overwhelmed, I'm going to write down my top 3 priorities. Right? If I'm having a bad day at work, I'm going to identify the one meaningful action I can take to finish the day strong. If I don't do anything else, I'm going to take one meaningful action. If I feel like everybody that I talk to, the communication's going sideways, I'm stressed, no one's responding well, everyone's mad at me, I'm going to identify one person that I can communicate and feel like I can have honest conversations instead of avoidance. Right? So again, I want you to pre-decide your response. I want you to link step 2 and step 3. Next, step 4, final step, your environment is always going to win over willpower. So I want you to put yourself in a position where the decisions that you need to make are easier because of your environment. You're not going to just rely on willpower alone. It's going to make good decisions easier. It's going to make bad decisions harder. What does that mean? Okay, well, if your goal is to train even when you feel like it, well, the environment to make that decision is not you laying on the couch. Right? The environment to make that decision is standing up, maybe outside, maybe at least commit to going to the gym, right? Maybe at least commit to putting on your running shoes so you can go for a walk. Change your state to change your state, right? Change your environment. If you need to have a challenging conversation, well, the place to do that is probably not hiding behind your computer. Maybe you need to go into the office. Maybe you need to set a coffee date with that individual. So think about how your environment impacts the results that you want and try to align your environment with the outcome that you want and the defaults that you'd like to fall to over just simply willpower. Because willpower, again, relies heavily on discipline. And we know at this point that discipline is not the full story. So we're just going to make sure that essentially we have the systems in place that support the defaults that we want. So next, let's put a bow on this. And I want you to think about everything we talked about. Again, I want to reiterate that, one, I don't think we rise to our goals. I think we fall to our defaults. Then I want you to remember the definition of default, right? So I'm going to repeat that. A default or defaults are the automatic behaviors that you fall back on when you stop thinking. So again, when stress takes over, fight or flight, lizard brain, we fall back to just kind of baseline human experience, human condition. Those are our defaults. And that's when discipline slips. Then I want you to go through the 4-step process of building better defaults. I'm going to repeat those. Step 1, I want you to identify your failure moments. When are the times that you typically fall off? I would encourage you to write these down. Again, busy weeks, travel, emotional stress, physical stress, low energy days. Define them. What are they? You know what they are. We all have this history. We know when we have these failure moments. Next, I want you to lower the floor. We're going to ask better questions. The question is not, how do I stay perfect? The question is, what's the minimum I still do no matter what? Then, once you define what that minimum is, I want you to pre-decide how you respond to that. Right? I don't skip. I do 10-minute workouts. I don't avoid conversations. I have them. I don't bail on work. I produce one meaningful thing every day. Whatever that is, pre-decide your response. Don't fully trust discipline. It will let you down sometimes. Next, try to align your environment with the results that you want. So, lastly, and I want to reiterate this, you don't need to become more disciplined. I think you have plenty of discipline. There's very few people that I meet that I would genuinely say aren't disciplined. Right? If you are in environments of people that are pushing for growth, and you could call them high achievers, you could call them whatever you want to call, I think we have plenty of discipline. So you don't need to become more disciplined. You need to become someone with better defaults. The times where you feel like you slip, where things fall off, where you don't make decisions in alignment with your goals or who you are and how you want to show up and the impact that you want to make, that's defaults. That's not discipline. So your challenge this week, I want you to think about this right now, is that this week, I don't want you to focus on being perfect. I want you to focus on what you do when things aren't perfect. So here's the reframe. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to respond better when things aren't perfect. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to respond better when things are imperfect, which is inevitable. Discipline assumes perfect conditions, oftentimes. Now, it can help us, again, weather the storm, but eventually that has a timeline, right? That tends to work in short bursts, not long timelines. And there is a version of you that is actually better by relying less on discipline, and that is the version that actually determines your results. I'm going to leave you with the fact that I think this so much reliance on discipline is actually one of the things that's backfired in some ways. It's backfired for some of us. Because we said, I'm disciplined. What's the missing piece? Defaults. It's our baseline. It's who we are, again, when things are imperfect. Who do we become? And I'm going to leave you with that. I want to keep this one clear, concise. Follow the steps that I broke down for you. Define how you respond. What do you want your defaults to be? How do you elevate those? Don't lose sight of discipline, but just know that discipline has its place. Discipline's short-term, defaults are long-term. You need both because things are dynamic. Life is full of curveballs. Who knows what's coming next? But when we have strong defaults, we feel less swayed. We're more proud of how we navigate these challenging seasons and situations. We have less of these fall off moments or failure moments and more wins. Those start to stack and we start to feel really damn good about ourselves. So I want you to have that. Define your defaults. Know that I think is an underserved secret weapon for so many of us. As always, I'm grateful for you, grateful for our community with Endurance Minded. As always, rate, subscribe, share this podcast. It would mean the world to me. Let us know what you think. You can find us at enduranceminded.com. Scroll to the bottom, leave us a comment. Let us know what's happening. Share this episode or your favorite with a friend. Rate right now on the platform that you're listening to this. Subscribe so you get updated and alerted of new episodes every other Tuesday. We have some amazing stuff in store for you. As always, stay tuned. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time on Endurance Minded.